The Cyberpunk2077 dystopian future is by far one of the most glorified dystopias in modern day media, and for a lot of good reasons, but one thing that often gets overlooked is the fact that this dystopia could have been easily avoided in the early 90s. If you didn't know, for the majority of history, our timeline and that of the cyberpunk universe share the same events until 1989. That's because in 1989, the cyberpunk universe's USA would be overtaken by a cabal known as the Gang of Four. The Gang of Four would essentially overrule the president by orchestrating a secret coup, giving them command of the United States. By the way, the Gang of Four was made up of the CIA, NSC, FBI, and DEA. With such revered intelligence agencies in charge of the country, one might think the USA was now in good hands, but that wasn't the case at all. Not only would this administration cause unnecessary wars driven by greed across the Americas, but the Gang of Four would also tank the US economy. In 1992, the franc, yen, pound, mark, and kroner would be combined into one new currency called the Eurodollar. And just to clarify, Europe had done its part and offered the then USA a chance to join. But for some reason, because of pride, stemming from God knows where, the Gang of Four declined the offer to join a currency that was clearly going to be more powerful than the then US dollar, since it was literally based on the average gold value of all the combined currencies. But as this meme has always warned us, the consequences would be felt in time. And oh, did the Grim Reaper not take his time. In 1994, just 2 years after the USA declined such an open-handed offer, the world stock crash of '94 would occur. While Europe would somewhat survive the effects of the crash for a while, the US economy would not be as lucky, since it would immediately collapse, and the Cyberpunk 2077 reality would be born. The effects took time to fully manifest, but by 1996, unemployment and homelessness spiked across the USA, and many city governments would collapse or go bankrupt. Unsurprisingly, the federal government would be rendered totally ineffective due to the chaos left behind by the Gang of Four and its poor decisions. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was as bad as it gets, because while reading the Cyberpunk 2013 sourcebook, that's what I thought too. Until, of course, my eyes landed on the next paragraph, and I immediately realized that this is Cyberpunk 2077, and there are no happy endings in this universe because the very first 2 words of the next paragraph were nomad riots. At this point, 1 in 6 Americans was literally homeless, which is why hundreds of thousands would riot for living space throughout the country during that period. And on the West Coast, nomad packs would first appear, and then slowly but steadily spread across the nation. But like the yin and yang, for every good creation that comes into existence, an equally messed up equivalent crawls through behind it to ensure that the balance between good and evil remains intact in our very loving world. And in this case, the evil born to counter the nomads would be the booster gangs. Booster gangs are basically gangs that would eventually evolve into messed up groups like Maelstrom. And if you thought that was all, you're wrong once again, because the next part is even more messed up, because shortly after this, a literal lawyer purge would take place. Yes, a lawyer purge would take place. The people who lost everything in the crash decided to literally lynch lawyers as a way of coping, which from my perspective didn't seem healthy at all. And after that, things kept on getting worse and worse, to the point where martial law would be established in the USA, forcing democracy to die. See, one could say that this was the year where the final nail would be driven into the coffin, permanently separating our timeline from that of the cyberpunk world. And that will be all for today, but before going off, I just wanted to say that I'll no longer animate any of my videos because I'm actually too inexperienced to be animating. And unfortunately, this is because it takes way too much time, to the point where we haven't even finished covering the first source book of the cyberpunk universe. At this point, we'll probably get to Warhammer and Endless Space when we're 80, which is why I have decided to use simple images and transitions to get the point across.